Alright coders, this is the last one for the lower grade coding contest. And I will tell you, this is going to be a tricky one. It's complex. A lot of the programs you've done so far only had really just a few lines of code. This one's going to be a little bit trickier. And hopefully this will all make sense though, and you'll be real successful at helping or at making a game where your sprite has to go through the maze. Start in one spot and get through the end without crossing any lines. So this program will teach event handling, conditionals, some if-then statements. It'll include motion, having a sprite move X and Y. We will have it do sensing, animation, and output on the screen. So here we go. First thing we want to do is draw our maze. So over to backdrop, there's not really one in here that we can choose. So we're going to draw our own. So click on the backdrop paint tool. And we're just going to draw some lines on here. I suggest you keep it a little bit simple to start with. You can always come back in and redo this later. It's not going to be a big deal to make the maze harder. And so let's just keep it nice and simple. You can look over on the stage at how that's looking. I think that's fine. Maybe you want to do straight lines on yours though. I'm just going to do mine kind of nice and squiggly. That's good for our maze. Let's switch back to our code tab and let's get rid of this scratch cat. I was thinking this one would be fun if we chose a sprite, and the one I liked when I did this earlier was this one here called Dog2. So I'm going to bring him into the program, and this dog is way too big for this maze. So the easiest way to switch that is to change this number here. This one I think maybe 40. 40 might be a good size. Whatever size you pick, you want to make sure that it'll fit through all of the spaces. My space here is a little bit tricky. We may have to adjust that later. But I think 40 for me is going to be good. Okay, so our sprite is here. The next thing you need to do is decide where you want it to start at. Okay, and I'm going to start mine in this top left corner. And every time we hit the green flag, we want the sprite to start in that spot. So that's an event. When the green flag is clicked, we want it to do motion. And the nice thing about dragging over the motion tool is these numbers are already filled in for where the sprite is currently. So you notice if I put it over here, it updates the code that I can bring over to represent those different numbers. Okay, but because I have this code here, when I hit the green flag, it'll put the dog back in the right spot. That's important because each time you run the program, you want the player to have to start at the beginning of the maze. And that's how we make that happen. Okay, so how is the dog going to get through the maze? Well, it would be a little silly to do that with the mouse. I mean, you could do that if you wanted. I was thinking that this would be better to do with the keyboard. So on your keyboard you have some up, down, left, right arrows. We haven't used those yet in any of our programs, so let's do those today. Those are going to be events. So click under events and drag this one over. This says when space key is pressed, and then we're going to put some code under there. Now we're not going to use the space bar. We're going to change this to, let's start with the down arrow. So when the down arrow happens, let's test this out. You can hear it'll just say right here, down. So when I hit the down arrow, see how he says down? We can get rid of that. And I guess to make that go away, okay. So that'll disappear. So we know when we hit the down arrow, whatever's under here will work. So what we want to do is move the dog. So that's under motion. And we don't want to just move 10 steps because watch what happens when I hit the down arrow. Moving 10 steps just makes the sprite move in the direction that it's facing. That's no good for us. What we want to do is, depending on the arrow we push, change how the sprite moves around on the screen. So you may have learned about this in school already, or maybe not, but here you go. On the computer screen, you have coordinates that are X and Y. You can see that right here. Go to X, -203, 149. That's the spot right centered under the sprite right here. Think about it for a second. If we want that dog to move down, we're going to need to change one of these numbers. You can actually see over here which number is changing. Now the 203 is going to change a little bit because I can't move it exact. But do you see which number here is changing the most? It's that Y number. Keep an eye on that as I move this down again. What's happening to that Y number as I move the sprite downward? Did you notice it's getting smaller? Watch that again. I'm going to move it down with the mouse, but watch what happens to the Y. Gets smaller. That's what we want to happen when we hit the down arrow. So, if you scroll down here, there's change X by, there's set X2, there's change Y by, and set Y2. We want this one. Change Y by 10. Now watch what happens if I hit the down arrow and we change the Y by 10. Wait a second, it's moving up. Well, if this was our up code, that would be just right, but we want it to go down. Well, the way we do that is to make this a negative number. So type in -10. Watch what happens when I hit the down arrow now. Down, 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 down. It's going down. Okay, now let's do a conditional. Did you see how he walks straight through that line? Well, that kind of defeats the purpose of a maze. We could go ahead and add the other button codes here, but I want to fix this one first and then just duplicate it. So think about it. What we need to do is say, okay, when you hit the down arrow, move the sprite. But if he's touching the line, don't move the sprite. Well, there's different ways to do that. I think the easiest one is the one I'm going to do right now, which is do a conditional here. So when the down arrow is pressed, move down, and then do a control. So we've done one of these before, and we're going to drag over this one that says if hexagon then, and under sensing we're going to use this one, if touching color green. Now we don't want green though. What color is our maze? Well, you can actually use this tool if you want to come over here and click on it, or you can adjust these sliders here. But no, now whatever color you drew your maze in, that's the color you need to pick here. And what I'm going to do is let's make sure this works first of all. I'm going to say touching line for 2 seconds. So watch this. We'll hit the green flag to reset it. We'll hit the down arrow. Now every time we hit the down arrow, it runs through this code. Changes it by -10. Checks to see if it's touching black. And if it is, then say touching line. Watch what happens as we get closer. Okay. So our program knows when it's touching that line. So think about that. What do we need to do when it touches the line? I think the easiest thing is to do the opposite of this. So you're going to go down, then you're going to check to see if it's touching the line, and if it is, go back up. So watch this. You should see the dog jump actually. Oh, it doesn't jump, it just stops it. And so it doesn't go down now because it goes down, but if it's touching black, it goes right back up. There we go. Okay, I want to add one more thing to this before I copy it, which is let's make the way it looks, because I mentioned in the introduction that we would do some animation. Every time we hit the down arrow, let's change his costume. You see how he's walking right now? He's got a weird eyeball thing going in. Let's go into his costumes and just delete that one. I think him walking would be great. But I clicked on that little X with the eyeball one just because we're not going to have him stop and think about something. We just want his feet to move. And that's working great. All right, the dog's almost done actually. All we need to do is let's do a right click or control click on this. Duplicate it over here. Think about it. We need this to say up arrow, and the up arrow code is going to be the exact opposite of the down arrow code. So how are we going to do that? Well, instead of moving -10 to go down and then 10 to go back up, we're going to move +10 to go up and then -10 to go back down. Okay, so hit the green flag. I hit down, it goes down, it stops at the line, but if I hit up, it goes up. Test this. If I'm down here and I go up, can I go through the line? No, I can't. Now we just need to do the left and right arrow. So we're going to duplicate this one. This gets a little bit trickier though, because we're not going to, let's move that over here. We're not going to be able to move left and right by changing the Y values. All Y does is where it is up and down on the screen. So go to motion, find this one that says change X, and we need to put that in instead. Change X by. And then we're going to take the change Y by out. Now, I don't know if I've shown you this before, but you can't just get rid of this because it grabs everything that's under it too. So I like to remove the bottom, drag it out, and then here we can just get rid of that one, change Y. So now when we hit down arrow, change X by 10, and if it's touching black, change X by 10. That's not right. Let's do this as the right arrow. So X will be getting bigger if we move to the right. And if it hits the black line, that's where we're going to want that -10 to be. See? We're hitting the right arrow. It works, but it stops when it gets to the line. Let's try that again over here. Right arrow, right arrow, right arrow, right arrow, right arrow. But it doesn't go through the line because when it's touching black, even though it just moved 10, it goes back in the opposite direction. Let's duplicate this for the left arrow. And boys and girls, you should be able to figure out real quick what we need to do here. For the left arrow, what do we need to do to make it go the opposite direction as when you hit the right arrow? Well, if you guessed you need to change these numbers, you're exactly right. Okay, alright, so let's reset our flag. We can move down, we can't go through the line. We can move right, can't go through the line. We can move left, we can move up, and the dog part of our maze is almost done. All we need now is a finish line, something at the end or something at the end of the maze so that the game tells you, congratulations, you won. We're going to use real similar code here, and let's do this. Let's put in, well, there's different ways to do this. Oh, well, let's add a sprite first of all. Here we go. Let's have our finish line just be this. What would a dog want to go get? Let's have the dog wants to get to his food bowl. Okay, so here's the bowl. So we need our program to know when the dog is touching the bowl. There's different ways to do it. Let's just do it. We could let's talk about it. We could have one, we could check to see if the dog is actually touching the ball. That would match the space chase code that we did earlier. We could see if it's touching the color brown. That would be similar to our code with the lines. We could do it every time it moves, it checks for that, or we could have a loop that's always running to see if the dog is touching the ball. Let's do, I think we'll go with the easiest way. Let's do another event. Nope, that's not an event. Let's do control. And we're going to do this at the bottom of each of these codes right here. This is a sensing issue. Let's see if the dog is touching, not the mouse pointer, but bring that one over. If the dog is touching the bowl, then let's say for 2 seconds, you win. I think that'll be the easiest way to do it. Okay, so let's duplicate just that last bit. Attach that to each of these movement commands. And think about that. That should work. If touching bowl, then say you win for 2 seconds. Let's reset it. Going around the lines, and we just won the maze. Alright, we are MazeMasters. Let's call that the name of our program here. And let's talk about some ways I can challenge you. Okay, so to make this more difficult, here's some things you could do. Obviously, one, you could make the line, your maze harder. So more lines that are closer together, and so the player could actually get lost in the maze. Number two would be you could add in a sprite that sends the player back to start. So if you added in here like a spider and did a same check here that says if it's touching the spider, then go back to here, that would be a fun way to do it. especially if you could program it so the spider was moving